Hello, I'm Ollie and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, cowboys versus slashers. This is everything I'm planning to read in June. So I'm going to split this video into three sections because I've got three different focuses for my reading in June. So you may remember it's the month of June on the Range, the fantastic Western themed reading event created by Michael K. Vaughan. I'm delighted to be one of the co-hosts for that again this year, and I've definitely got some Westerns to talk about. I've also got some books I need to read for ongoing projects, so I'm going to talk about those first. And then I'm also going to try and read some extreme horror this month. So some more kind of disturbing, more out there horror books. It's something that I've become quite interested in over the last few months, and I'm keen to try some of the kind of better known books of the genre, as well as a couple of newer ones as well. So three sections to this video. The first section then is going to be my kind of general commitments section, if you like. So the first book I'm going to talk about for that is The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert Heinlein. So I'm reading that as part of my buddy reading with my dad, his 12 favourite books. So this is one I've read before, and in fact I've read it since I started the channel. So if you care to look back through my videos, you might be able to find my previous thoughts on it. I didn't love it first time around, I'll be honest with you, but it's definitely a book with some interesting concepts. It's a science fiction book about a lunar colony. So really interested to read it again and to share my thoughts with my dad, because he'll be reading it too. So that's the first thing. The second two things then are for the My Novel Life project, where I'm reading a novel from every year I've been alive. So you might remember that when I picked my picks for the books from the 80s, I did it wrong. For My Novel Life, you're supposed to pick books you hadn't read before, and I picked a bunch that I had already read. I'm really keen to still reread those, but I have also picked a book that I haven't read for each of the years where I had previously picked a book that I had read, if that makes sense. So I've got two books for My Novel Life then, and I think I'm right in saying the year is 1984. I forgot to make a note, but I'm pretty sure it's 1984. You can let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. So the first book, the one that I have already read before, is The Hunt for Red October by Tom Clancy. So, you know, the book that kick-started Clancy's career. I remember really enjoying it. I do like kind of submarine warfare, not taking part in it clearly, but reading about it, I do think there's something about that kind of claustrophobia, which is really interesting. And it's also an interesting book about the relationship between, you know, the US and the USSR towards the end of the Cold War. So yeah, really looking forward to reading that again. The really interesting thing, I think personally, about that book is it wasn't originally published by a fiction publisher. It was originally published by, I think, the US Naval Institute or something like that. So was published by the Navy as a kind of a book that showed kind of tactics and different scenarios for submarine warfare. So I think that's quite interesting. So yeah, looking forward to reading that again. The other book I'm going to read then, the book that I haven't read before, is Proof by Dick Francis. So I think I've said on the channel before, I think the first adult book I read, the first like grown-up book I read, was a Dick Francis book. I can't remember which one it was, but I think, probably 10. So that would have been the year before Proof came out. That would have been in 1983. So it definitely wasn't Proof. So Dick Francis was a jockey. He was one of the royal jockeys. And after retiring from horse racing, became a thriller writer and was really, really successful over here in the UK. Published dozens of books. And in fact, I think his son, Felix Francis, is still publishing books kind of in the Dick Francis line. So yeah, looking forward to reading Proof, which is kind of a crime thriller set in the world of horse racing. Moving on then, so other commitments I have. So the first of those is the CriminOlly Book Club, the book club I run for my patrons and channel members. So this month, June, we are going to be reading The Descent by Jeff Long, which is a bit of a chunker, I have to say. It's over 500 pages, but it does sound like the kind of book I really enjoy. So it's kind of one of those books that's a blend of thriller and science fiction and horror. So about apparently a global labyrinth of undiscovered tunnels and caves. is apparently an extraordinary thriller that pulls the world from beneath our feet, from the Himalayas to Bosnia to the bed of the Pacific. It's a headlong rush into the depths of greed, a foolish quest for forbidden knowledge. So it does sound like a fun kind of airport style of book. So yeah, really looking forward to reading that. If you fancy joining my book club, in order to do so, you should become one of my patrons or channel members. There's always a link in the description to my video to links to those where you can find more information. So yes, that's what we're going to be reading this month. Moving on then, two other projects I've got ongoing at the moment are reading books by my two favourite authors trying to finish their back catalogues. So the first of those is Ed McBain / Evan Hunter. So I'm going to be reading his book Big Man. This is a 1970s, I think, UK Penguin edition, originally published in the 1950s, only in the US, not in the UK, under the name Richard Marston. So that was another of the pseudonyms that Evan Hunter used. Ed McBain was also a pseudonym. So yeah, this is about, I think, a kind of mafia enforcer type character. So yeah, interested to see what that one's like. McBain very rarely lets me down. And then I have another big chunky book. I got Fairy Tale by Stephen King, his fairly recent kind of fantasy novel. I think people have given me mixed reports on this one, so we'll see what it's like. But yeah, looking forward to reading a bit more King and seeing him doing fantasy. I have kind of slightly mixed feelings about the Dark Tower series. I think parts of it are really great, and parts of it I find a little bit irritating, if I'm honest. I thought the whole kind of metafiction side of it was maybe a little bit overdone. But I do remember enjoying Eyes of the Dragon, his first fantasy novel, which I read years and years and years ago. So we'll see what I think of Fairy Tale anyway. Right, moving on then to June on the Range. So I've got quite a stack here. I'm not necessarily going to read all of these. I've got some that are kind of in standby, but let me talk you through the ones I'm definitely going to read. So the first of those then is Fatal Elixir by William L. D'Andrea. So this is a mystery novel. I read the first of these, which was called Written in Fire, about a year ago, and I really enjoyed it. So it's the setup is there's a guy who's a writer who writes like dime novels, who teams up with a grizzled old kind of sheriff to write about his adventures, and they end up becoming a crime-solving team. So the first one, Written in Fire, I thought was absolutely great. Really enjoyed it. Had one of the most enjoyable gunfight scenes I've ever read in it. So William L. D'Andrea sadly only wrote one more book in the series, which is Fatal Elixir. But yeah, really looking forward to trying that one. I then also said for June on the Range I wanted to read a Max Brand book. So Max Brand was a very prolific writer of westerns. Started I think in like the 1920s. I read one of his Dr. Kildare books recently, clearly not a western, but I really enjoyed that enormously. A very talented, well crafted kind of bit of fun literature. So I decided I'd try one of his westerns. The one that caught my eye purely because I know it's a movie and I'd heard of the movie was Destry Rides Again, which I think originally came out in the 1930s. So yeah, looking forward to that one. And then the other thing I said I was going to do, or one of the other things I said I was going to do for June on the Range was read an actual dime novel from the 1800s. So I found one on Comeau Plus. It's got the wonderful title of Old California Joe, and it's written by an author with an almost as appealing name, Captain Carleton. So this, I think, originally came out in the 1860s, and I think it's kind of about a prospector. So yeah, looking forward to that. So other stuff for June on the Range then. So first up we have this one. So this was recommended by the author Mark Hodder to me when he saw my June on the Range video. So this is The Time It Never Rained by Elmer Kenton. And this is, I believe, based on a true story, and it's about a terrible drought somewhere in America. I'm not sure where. It's set in the 1950s. So 1950s Texas. So not necessarily a traditional Western setting. I think typically Westerns kind of finish in the 1920s or so. But yeah, apparently really good, and definitely a Western locale, even if the decade is slightly long. And I think Elmer Kenton also wrote a bunch of Westerns. So yeah, looking at the titles of some of his other books, they've got titles like The Buckskin Line, Buffalo Wagons, Cloudy in the West, The Day the Cowboys Quit. So yeah, definitely a Western writer. So yeah, very much looking forward to that. I'm also going to be continuing the Edge series. So my first ever video on the channel was a review of the first book in the Edge series, The Loner by George G. Gilman. And when I first started the channel, I used to read an Edge book every month. I've fallen out of that habit, sadly, and I've got dozens of these books in the garage. So I need to start reading them again, and this felt like a very good opportunity. So I have a very, very battered copy here that I got off eBay. I don't know if you can, how well you can see the spine of it, but it's absolutely knackered. So anyway, this is Edge book 23, Echoes of War, by George G. Gilman, and delightfully it's got at the back an advert for the other series that I used to read when I first started the channel, the Executioner series. So I do need to get back into those as well. And then the other thing I definitely want to try and do for June on the Range is read the final book in this lovely Library of America Western collection, which is Warlock by Oakley Hall, which I didn't realise how long it was when I went to prepare for this video. I saw it's over 500 pages long, so it's quite a chunky book, and I think it's quite heavy. So it was Pulitzer Prize, like shortlisted or nominated, and I think whilst it's a Western, it talks a lot to the kind of McCarthy era in the US, so quite a political book, I suspect. So I have at least one subscriber, DDB, who whenever I mention this book tells me it's really hard work, and he doesn't usually steer me wrong, to be honest with you, DDB. So we will see how I get on with it, but I'm definitely going to give it a try because I'd love to complete this collection. Right, moving on then. Hopefully that pile won't topple over. So I've also got a stack of kind of slimmer paperbacks, which are kind of fun westerns to kind of weave in with the rest if I get time. So I've got a couple from the Gunsmith series by J.R. Roberts. So I've got book 66, Outlaw Trail, and book 236, The Cherokee Strip, and also book 331, The Man with the Iron Badge. So yeah, I may give those a try. And then I've got a few long arm books as well. So Long Arm 294, Long Arm and the Arizona Flame. Book 245, Long Arm and the Vanishing Virgin. These, of course, by Tabor Evans, albeit that's a house name. They were written by a bunch of different people. And then Long Arm and the Lone Star Rustlers, which is a Long Arm Lone Star crossover. So Long Arm is like a marshal who goes around solving crimes. The Lone Star books are about a female marshal and her sidekick, who's like a ninja, basically. So they're quite fun. So yeah, that's a crossover between those two series. This pile of books is almost tall enough to be on camera now, but not quite. And then I've also got a book that's kind of a Western. So this is City Primeval by Elmer Leonard. So Elmer Leonard started out as a Western writer, and I've read a few of his Westerns and they're great. He then became a crime writer, but this is a book I think that kind of mashes the two genres. So it's a contemporary crime novel, but with lots of kind of Western themes and tropes and things like that woven into it, I believe. Its subtitle is High Noon in Detroit. Right, let's move some of these books so I don't end up with them toppling over, and then we'll have a chat about the extreme horror. So, a few things for that. And as I said at the start, this is kind of a mix of books that are very well considered in the extreme horror, kind of community, and some newer things as well. And I've tried to be quite varied in this list. So there are some books which are, I guess you would say, like pure extreme horror. So a couple that are, definitely extreme horror. A couple that are a bit more literary, but are still definitely, kind of extreme disturbing books. So yes, we'll see what we'll see what you think of the list. If you're an extreme horror fan, do let me know in the comments what you think. So the first one is Butcher by Joyce Carol Oates. So her new novel, which is about based on a true story, I believe, and about a doctor doing horrible things. It's supposed to be intensely disturbing. I read Joyce Carol Oates' book Zombie a couple of years ago, and that was really disturbing. So a book about a kind of Jeffrey Dahmer type character. So yeah, really interested to see what Butcher's like. She's an author who I'm coming to really admire, and was incredibly prolific. So I think she may be the next person who I try and read all of their books. Next up then, we have a very new book. So this has only just come out. So this is Nasty by J.G. Davis McCabe. I did give a warning when I held this book up in my book haul about how graphic the cover was, so apologies for not having done that this time around. It really is very, very horrible. So this is a British slasher novel, I think set in the 1980s, that kind of ties in the video nasty scare into its story, and is supposedly a bit of a homage to the work of Sean Hudson, who's a writer I really, really enjoy. So yeah, I'm interested to see what this is like, and it's even got a nice guide to the video nasties at the front, so a little kind of mini essay from the author, kind of setting the scene for the book. Next up, one, I don't know if this is considered to be extreme horror or not, but it's definitely supposed to be very, very disturbing. It's a book I've been meaning to read for a while. The cover almost, but not quite, requires censorship. I think I can just about get away with it. So it's The Sluts by Dennis Cooper, which is a novel about kind of the early days of the internet, and kind of like gay dating websites and things like that, but supposed to be very, very graphic and disturbing as well. So we'll see what that is like. And then moving on to a couple of books. So these are the two books that I think are, definitely, like, undeniably, I think no one would argue with these being extreme horror. So the first is Survivor by JF Gonzalez, which I've been meaning to read for ages. So it's supposed to be incredibly grueling and horrible. So we'll see how I get on with that. I don't know why I'm letting myself in for this, but we shall see. And then the second one is The Bighead by Edward Lee, which again is a book I've heard like so many people talk about. Supposed to be like right from page one, like incredibly horrible. I had been trying to get hold of a copy of it for ages, and then discovered that the website Godless have an EPUB copy up for sale. So I managed to get that very, very cheaply, much more cheaply than the copies the paper copies I've been watching on eBay. So yeah, we shall see what that is like, and if indeed I manage to finish it. And then the final one is another book I've been trying to get hold of for ages. The Summer is Ended and We Are Not Yet Saved by an author called Joey Comeau. I think this is a Canadian book, and I believe it's like a slasher novel set in a like Christian summer camp. So I've been trying to get hold of this for absolutely ages. It's out of print. I had a safe search for it on eBay, which was not throwing up any copies that were less than kind of 60 quid. But the author has just republished it. So he posted on Reddit that he just republished it. So I grabbed an EPUB copy of that as well. So yeah, very much looking forward to seeing what that's like. So that is the end of quite a long TBR. I think there's 18 books on there that I definitely want to read. And then those additional westerns as well. So we will see how I get on. But yeah, really keen, really looking forward to diving into some westerns again for June on the Range, and also really looking forward to trying some more extreme horror. I will probably do a kind of extreme horror themed video if I manage to get through all of those books. Anyway, do let me know in the comments if you've read any of the books I talked about. Let me know if you're taking part in June on the Range. Let me know what you think of my choices generally this month. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.